The mafia, when they want to take action with regard to people, they never do it themselves. And they never do it so they're going to be investigated. The best example is Oswald, because I've been able to prove in the book a relationship there with them, which Dorothy found out about, a connection there. And so when he can't let JFK become president anymore, he goes ahead and he implements this strategy of getting rid of JFK, using, I believe, 2 shooters from Europe that he brought in, and then using Oswald as a patsy.
You're listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, where you get valuable information you just can't find anywhere else. To thrive in today's trying times, you need the Financial Survival Network, now more than ever. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and get your free newsletter and gift. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. Next guest, somebody who really has done amazing work throughout his life, a person who, if you wanted to call him an investigative bloodhound, that would be an understatement. Mark Shaw is with us. Mark, you've written so many books. Your latest book is out, and, abuse of power. You just keep pumping them out. It's amazing. How many of these books have you written now?
Well, I started with, I'm a former criminal defense lawyer. So I was, first of all, a criminal defense lawyer. And then after a few too many times of being involved with high-profile murder cases, I decided to do something else. I ended up as a legal analyst on the networks with O.J. and Kobe Bryant and Mike Tyson and all of that, and started then to think about writing books. The first book was actually about the Mike Tyson trial, because I was there right in that courtroom when it happened, and I was really dissatisfied with what happened to Tyson. I didn't feel like the evidence was there to convict him, and so I wrote a book called Down for the Count. And I think, like you, with the many books you've written, I'm amazed at what you've done too. I like the process. I like the investigative part of it, of looking and finding the evidence, like a detective would, or a prosecutor would, or whatever, defensive lawyer would, or whatever. I like the process. And so I started in writing books, and there were a number of them that were done. I wrote some books that, some people got upset with, for sure. But everything changed when I found out about a woman named Dorothy Kilgallen, who I believe you're familiar with, because your parents named you after Dorothy's son, Kerry.
Yes.
And I think that's when we first got in touch with each other years ago. And it's amazing because what knowing about Dorothy did for me, there are now 7, this will be the 7th Abuse of Power, 7th book that touches on Dorothy Kilgallen, JFK, and now RFK. And it's been quite a journey, because one book leads to the other. The first one that happened, actually, the name of Dorothy Kilgallen came up, and I didn't know that it would. I practice law, and maybe you'll know this name, with a rather controversial criminal defense lawyer, and more than that, a lawyer who sued all the pharmaceutical companies and everybody else, named Melvin Belli.
Of course.
And he was a San Francisco attorney, and I practiced law, actually, with him in the 1980s. He had a building up on Montgomery Street. I was just up near there the other day. And he and I got to be pretty close friends. I had an office in that building. He took me to the Major League Baseball All-Star game in his Rolls Royce. But he was a bigger-than-life character. He was mostly known at the time for suing all the pharmaceutical companies. He got some of the first... What's that?
He was ahead of his time there.
That's right. And he got some of the first $1 million verdicts and everything else like that. But when Belli died in 1996, I decided to write a book about him, because, get this, he had written 2 autobiographies, but they conflicted. This was his own story.
Really?
So I decided to write a book, and that became Melvin Belli, King of the Courtroom. It was published in 2007, I believe. And I talked about the things that really interested me with him, especially him being a mafia wannabe. Belli loved the mafia, and I knew that when I was a friend of his, he would go to Las Vegas and hang out with him. His main client was a was Mickey Cohen, who was a Los Angeles West Coast gangster, and that'll play into when we're going to talk about the Robert Kennedy assassination. But Belli really loved the mafia, and as one of his friends said, the mafia loved him. So I wrote that book about him, and then I was going to quit, but it really bothered me that Belli represented Jack Ruby, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, the guy who shot Lee Harvey Oswald. But I was very interested in how Belli and the mafia had anything to do with the 1960 election. And since you're a historian like me, and in fact, in this book, there's 3 true-crime murder mysteries that we'll go into, but the first one came about because I learned that the 1960 election, Joe Kennedy wanted to be, you may remember, President of the United States.
Right.
He was ambassador to Great Britain, and unfortunately, Joe made a friend of Adolf Hitler. So when he got back in the United States, his reputation was tarnished, and he couldn't run for president. And so Joe said, and this has been documented in my books and others, okay, if I can't be president, then first will be Joe Kennedy Jr., but he got killed in the war. Then it'll be Jack Kennedy. Then it'll be Bobby Kennedy. Then it'll be Teddy Kennedy. But the key to all of that, you got to win the election in 1960. And he knew as he got closer and closer that JFK was going to lose that election. So Joe called in some of his underworld character he knew from his bootlegging days and stuff like that, Sam Giancana, Carlos Marcello, Sano Trafficani, some of these people, and said, all right, look, you help us win the election, and we will leave you alone. And unfortunately, they did help him win the election. But on the very day that they were in office, Bobby Kennedy was appointed Attorney General, and he went after the mob. He went after several of those individuals, but especially this guy named Carlos Marcello. You know, Bobby Kennedy hated the mafia, and he and Jack Kennedy had hearings to try to weed out the mafia and do something about it. But the real key to almost everything that happened, Kerry, is this book, The Enemy Within. And Bobby Kennedy wrote this book in 1961. And if you can imagine some of the things that he said about the mafia in that book, just think about, and you can't mess around with those guys. Yeah. He wrote, they are sleek, often bilious and fat, or lean and cold and hard. They have the smooth faces and cruel eyes of gangsters. They wear the same rich clothes, the diamond ring, the jeweled watch, the strong, sickly smelling, sweet-smelling perfume. So you can imagine what their thoughts were about him. But then, as his first act as Attorney General, he illegally sent Carlos Marcello, deported him to the wilds of Central America, and tricked him into going to an immigration office in New Orleans. And we'll talk about who Marcello was. But you can't mess around with those guys. And so he sent Marcello to New Orleans. Marcello got back in the United States. And because I was a former criminal defense lawyer, I look at motive. And so when Marcello gets back in the United States, and he was one of the most dangerous mobsters in the United States. He controlled all of the rackets, the prostitution, the gaming, everything in New Orleans, stretched on to Dallas and all of that. And when he came back to the United States, he wanted to kill, as he said, that SOB Robert Kennedy. But he knew if he did, then Jack Kennedy and the government would come after everything, come after with him out with everything. And so what did he do? As I've proven in my books, he decided to orchestrate the death of Jack Kennedy so Bobby Kennedy would be powerless. And that's exactly what happened. Bobby never went after him or anything like that. That sets up everything that has happened. And that led to my books. Then I wrote a book about the 60 election, The Poison Patriarch. And I started writing books about those players who were involved in the JFK assassination by covering it up and all of that. I want to mention right now the most important document in the new book, and then we'll go back and we'll talk about Dorothy Kilgallen. When the JFK assassination records were released earlier this year, that was really a big deal. Yeah. The president said we're transparency. We're all going to come out. We're gonna give the American people these records, the JFK assassination records, Robert Kennedy assassinations, Martin Luther King assassinations, and so forth. Well, as you can imagine, that has never happened. And the ones that they did send out that I looked over and everything, released, a lot of it was redacted. But while I was looking at those records, I came across some FBI files that had been hidden. And it basically, I was amazed to see what I found, because in there was what we may call, and we can call, is a document that the FBI had hidden, and it's the confession of Carlos Marcello that he killed the President of the United States. And I have the document right in front of me, and it's in the new book, and I think it will actually just flabbergast your viewers, because it was never released. And here's what it said. On March 4th, 1986, John Ronald Van Lanningham, inmate, federal correctional prison in Texas, was interviewed and provided the following information. On December 15th, 1985, he was in the company of Carlos Marcello and another inmate at the Federal Corrections Institute in Texarkana, Texas. Carlos Marcello discussed his immense dislike of the former President John Kennedy, as he often did. Unlike other times, however, the other tirades against Kennedy, in this occasion, Carlos Marcello said, referring to President John F. Kennedy, "Yeah, I had the son of a bitch killed. I wish I did. I'm sorry I couldn't have done it myself. Yeah, I had the son of a bitch killed. I'm glad I did. I'm sorry I couldn't have done it myself." That document, which has been verified, it was audio taped. We're finding the audio tapes now. It just changes everything about any of the assassinations of JFK, the murder of Dorothy Kilgallen, and the assassination of Robert Kennedy. And I want to then, when we have a chance, and you go ahead and ask any questions you do, Kerry, because you're very observant, what do you want to know about that document? And then we'll go back and talk about Dorothy Kilgallen.
All right. So it's been authenticated. And were there any notes from the FBI on that document?
Not on that document, but it was audio taped. Now, that audio tape has been hidden for years, and I've been trying to find it. It is part of the court case. What they did is the FBI operated a sting against Carlos Marcello, who had been convicted in Louisiana, actually, for the first time he was ever convicted.
Yeah.
Of trying to bribe state officials on some labor jobs and stuff like that. So they sent him to Texas, and this was called Operation Brylab. And basically what the FBI wanted to do was to get evidence, against Marcello regarding the JFK assassination. So they found out about this Jack Van Lanningham, who was a bank robber, sentenced to a number of years in the Texas prison. And one way or another, then, the FBI compromised him, and they were able to go ahead and get him close to Marcello, including, at one point, being a cellmate of Marcello. Wow. So then they got a hold of Van Lanningham, and we have documentation in the book. Readers will learn that what they offered Van Lanningham, as you can imagine, is that the moment he could get evidence against Marcello regarding the assassination, he could walk out of prison.
Wow.
So they gave him a transistor radio with a recorder in it. And he recorded these comments from Marcello in 1985 and 1986. But that document and the audio tape were hidden from the public, just like this task force on government secrets that was convened early in the year has hidden it from the public now. Because you have to realize that by exposing that to the American public, it first of all just obliterates anything to do, obviously, with the Oswald alone file, Oswald in theory, because that makes no sense. Probably the whole CIA situation, the Russians, the government, all of these, the Cubans, everything. It really, if you're a prosecutor, you would use that document and the testimony of Van Lanningham to show that there was only one person who had the strongest motive to kill JFK, and that was Carlos Marcello.
Mm-hmm. So, but obviously the CIA was involved in it. LBJ was involved, right? They're all players in this.
I'm sorry, I can't agree with you there.
You don't think?
Here's the problem here's the problem with all of those possible theories. You have to go through a bunch of hoops. I've never been able to show a direct connection. For instance, of course, LBJ benefited from JFK's death because he became president. But I've never been able to, and never has anybody else been able to show direct evidence without having to go through all these hoops that the CIA was involved in JFK's death, that LBJ was, that the CIA was, and so on and so forth. And in my book, this new book, and in the other ones too, there's no question that there's a direct link in there, because you've got this motive by Marcello, and he cannot let, just think about it, common sense logic, he cannot let John F. Kennedy become president of the United States, because if he does, then Robert Kennedy, who knows that Marcello set up JFK for the kill, is going to go ahead and come after Marcello, or come after
Right.
Marcello.
Sure.
So if you think about it, that is common sense logic and makes a great deal of sense. And the books that I wrote about this, including the next one, which is The Reporter Who Knew Too Much, which you know about, Dorothy Kilgallen, then Denial of Justice, then the Collateral Damage that connected Marcello with the deaths of Dorothy and Marilyn Monroe, as a matter of fact, then Fighting for Justice, and now Abuse of Power. I've been able to set up one thing that is so important that's never been in any book whatsoever before. I look at the deaths of JFK, JFK 63, Dorothy Kilgallen 65, and Robert Kennedy 68 in context with each one, the other ones with each one. And what you're going to hear me talk about today is that in each particular case, there was a patsy that was used. The first one was Oswald with the JFK assassination. The second one was this Ron Pataki that you may be aware of, who was Dorothy Kilgallen's love interest, just before she died, because she shared her JFK assassination investigation files with him, and then Marcello was able to compromise him. And then with regard to Robert Kennedy, we will show that Sirhan Sirhan was used as a patsy in the death of Robert F. Kennedy. That's the difference between my book and any others here, is you're able to show them in context. You can look at them individually, but it's so interesting to see the pattern that took place, because remember one thing, the mafia, when they want to take action with regard to people, they never do it themselves, and they never do it so they're going to be investigated. The best example is Oswald, because I've been able to prove in the book a relationship there with them, which Dorothy found out about, a connection there. And so when he can't let JFK become president anymore, he goes ahead and he implements this strategy of getting rid of JFK, using, I believe, 2 shooters from Europe that he brought in, and then using Oswald as a patsy, so that the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, they're going to go after this theory about Oswald. Remember, that's what Hoover did right when Oswald was arrested. It's Oswald alone, and we all believe that was what happened, because Hoover cannot let there be I like to call it a plot to kill the president, because if there's a plot and more people are involved, Kerry, then the FBI could have stopped it. And Hoover, the last thing Hoover wants to do is have that happen, because what? He wants to keep his job. And then he will do the same thing with the cover-up of Dorothy's death, and the same thing with the cover-up of Robert Kennedy's death.
All right, but what about the Warren Commission? So once LBJ was president, he had no interest in letting the truth get out, right?
Not at all. And I want to insert in here Dorothy for a minute, because that's so important. I know it's important to you because there's new evidence in the book about her. And then I want to get back to LBJ and the Warren Commission. Dorothy Kilgallen, as you know, was an amazing story. And you and I both were just at a ceremony back in New York City that I'm going to talk about in a minute. But she was a college dropout. Her father was a very well-known reporter for the New York Evening Journal, which became the New York Journal American. In fact, I don't know if you know it, but Dorothy's father was the first reporter to expose the Dachau prison camp during World War II.
Really?
So his credentials were amazing. And there's Dorothy. She doesn't want to go to college. She asked him to do her a favor and let her become an intern at the New York Evening Journal. So that happens. Dorothy right away faces gender discrimination and sexual discrimination. They won't let her write any big time articles. A lot of the editors are jealous of her even getting the job. I have an example in the book, Carrie, where she went ahead and wrote an article about one criminal trial because she was really interested in criminal trials, and she had to write it 10 times. That would never happen with a male reporter. She had to write it 10 times before they ever published it. So she started going ahead and trying to get assignments for big trials. The first one was Charles Lindbergh's baby kidnapping case, but they wouldn't let her handle that. But she kept after it and kept after it and kept writing her articles. So the next one that she was involved in was the 1954 trial of Dr. Sam Shepard, which you may remember, was the foundation for the Fugitive movie and television show and all of that. And there's a photograph that I have in front of me that's in the book of Dorothy in the middle of the courtroom at the Dr. Sam Shepard case with all of the other reporters around her in admiration. But one question you may be asking yourself that a lot of readers do, and probably your viewers will too, where did Dorothy Kilgallen get all this guts to go ahead and have the courage to not only write these articles, but later on when we'll talk about when she gets involved in the JFK assassination, basically call J. Edgar Hoover and the other people involved in the FBI liars, and that they are not telling the truth about the JFK assassination. Well, where she got the courage, as I think I said in New York, and we'll talk about that, is chronicled in this book, Girl Around the World. What did that have to do with? Dorothy is 23 years old in 1936. There is going to be what they called a race around the world, and they're 3 or 4 men, two men who are first of all the competitors. They're going to go around the world using commercial transportation available to the public, buses, the subway, cabs, cars, primitive air travel, all of these things. And so she hears about it, and she convinces her father and the people at the Evening Journal to let her compete. So she did. And she spent, I think, 23 days traveling around the world. All the way, they started in New York City, traveling with the Hindenburg, which blew up a year later, by the way.
Wow.
And she ended up going to London, Paris, Spain, Portugal, and then kept going around the world, South America, Indochina, and there's a great story in here I want to mention, Indochina, all the way around to Australia, and then to Hawaii, and finally back to New York City. And in this book, people will read. I was able to get a rare copy of it. I've gotten the permission of the copyright holder to go ahead and republish this book, and I'm going to do that in probably February or March, because I changed hardly any of the words that Dorothy used, because as you know, as Ernest Hemingway said at the time, she was one of the greatest female writers in the world. She wouldn't have liked female writers because she was one of the greatest writers. If I could write half as well as Dorothy, I would have had 10 bestsellers instead of 1. And she goes ahead and she talks about the plane she's in, which is a small plane, a kind of crash landing in Indochina. And she says, finally, the pilot shrugged his shoulders in oriental despair and nosed down for a landing while thoughts of bandits, kidnapping, murders, and revolution sizzled in my head. Bump, bump, splash, splash. We thumped down jarringly in the middle of the field. The plane was not damaged, but in a second I thought all of my worst fears about this province were realized. Occurring like gnomes from the ground, almost 600 natives surrounded the plane with spears in their hand. And, she was able to go ahead and use the courage that she had there. I think you'll really be interested in those kinds of stories because, Dorothy was a person who was gutsy, as Larry King told me during an interview. She was one who would stand up for the truth. She was a woman of the truth. I like to say, and if you don't mind, I'm going to, I think that you have some lineage from Dorothy because you're a man of the truth, Carrie, and you're a namesake. And I'm sure you're very proud of her. And as you know, about a little more than a month now ago, you joined me in New York City because Dorothy Kilgallen was the recipient of the co-naming of a street in New York City at East 68th Street and Park Avenue, and it's named now Dorothy Kilgallen Way. The New York City Council set that up. We were both there. We both listened to exactly what they said about here. And one thing they did in a flyer was say, "Join us as we honor the extraordinary legacy of Dorothy Kilgallen, pioneering journalist, author, and fearless voice for truth. Dorothy's groundbreaking career in print and television broke barriers for women in media, and her commitment to investigative reporting made a lasting impact on American journalism. We proudly recognize her life, work, and contributions to our city and our nation with this special street co-naming." So that street sign is now right there at East 68th Street. Remember, she lived at 45 East 68th Street. We stood, you and I and others who were there, right in front of that building, and I had some goosebumps when I did, because that's the place where Dorothy did all of her work. And we should say it right now. That's where she wrote her Voice of Broadway column for the New York Journal-American, syndicated to 200 newspapers across the country. That's where she got ready and prepared for being the star performer on the television show What's My Line, which was on CBS every Sunday night. I'm sure you probably watched it if you're old enough. She had a radio show listened to by 1 million people a day. I mean, Dorothy was the real thing, and this tribute to her by the New York City Council meant so much to me, and I'm sure it did to you. But Dorothy then found out about what happened with JFK, and why was she interested? She was interested because none other than JFK used to come to 45 East 68th Street and go ahead and play charades there. They became friends. Jackie came there. They knew each other. And so when John F. Kennedy died, the first column she wrote, Carrie, said this: "What I remember is a tall man stooping over a little boy, making a lot of fuss over the letters he had brought from his third grade class, because JFK had invited Dorothy and her son, Kerry, to the White House. He made a big fuss. He gave her a PT 109 pin and all of that. And so, unlike me, unlike anybody else who's ever looked into the JFK assassination, and she's the most credible journalist to have done so, and we'll talk about what she uncovered, it was personal with her. She wanted to find out what happened to her friend, and when he was assassinated, she left for Dallas, and then she started looking into the assassination. She first of all interviewed Jesse Curry, who was the Dallas police chief, and that what he told her triggered the rest of her 18-month investigation into JFK's death, because Jesse Curry, one of the first things he told her, and I found this very rare book, he reveals his personal JFK assassination file. First thing he told her was, "Dorothy, the shots came from the overpass and the grassy knoll." And you see right away then, she knew that this Oswald alone theory that J. Edgar Hoover was shouting out, made no sense whatsoever. The first column she wrote, Carrie, was "The Oswald file must not close." She wrote, "They've killed the president. The government is not prepared to tell us the truth, and I'm going to do everything in my power to find out what really happened." Well, as you can imagine, she put a target on her back, because she's going up against, probably other than the President of the United States, which was LBJ, the second most powerful was J. Edgar Hoover. And he could not, as I said again, let there be known that there was a plot to kill the president, because it would have shown for sure that the FBI should have stopped it. That's the woman that your mother named you after.
Yeah.
Or it's not your son of the mother.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so, there's just like so many things to unpack there, but the whole idea, the breadth of the cover-up, and supposedly J. Edgar Hoover was compromised by the mob as well, right? So he wasn't going to do any investigating.
And I like to say that I'm not only a historian, but an educator in some way, just like you are. In the book, people are going to be amazed when they see an account of J. Edgar Hoover and LBJ deciding who they want on the Warren Commission. Mm-hmm. Well, of course, they don't want anybody that's not going to go with the Oswald alone theory. So the first guy they pick is Gerald Ford, who's going to be president of the United States, and they use that old adage, he can't think and chew gum at the same time. He's not going to be a threat at all. All right, they use Alan Dulles, who JFK went ahead, CIA at a JFK, who went ahead and was fired by JFK.
Yeah.
Well, okay, he wants to close the case. And then they go ahead and you'll see some of the things in there they say. But one point they say, well, we're a little concerned because there's a dirty columnist out there that we have to be afraid of in terms of what she might do to find out what we're doing with the Warren Commission. And we know who that was. No question about it. So they convened the Warren Commission. They picked a couple senators, one of whom became a very good friend of Dorothy's. She's able to get the inside dope on what the Warren Commission, what they investigated and what they didn't. And that's in the book. And I think people will be amazed to read the accounts line by line of what these two men said to cover up the truth about what happened with JFK.
Yeah, fascinating. Fascinating. So again, we should repeat the name of the book, Abuse of Power, Connecting Robert Kennedy's Assassination with the Murders of JFK. Dorothy Kilgallen exposes who was responsible and why Sirhan Sirhan deserves a new trial. Definitely Sirhan was a patsy, because we know that the bullet wounds of RFK came from behind, not from in front, where Sirhan was shooting from. And that's a story in itself. What amazes me, Mark, is how corrupt these local police departments, these city police departments were. A lot of them, they had CIA infiltration, FBI infiltration, and they basically did what they were told.
Well, with regard to Sirhan, so I've gone ahead in the reporter into too much and showed what happened to Dorothy with the patsy Ron Pataki. I've gone ahead and showed with JFK the patsy with Oswald. So now I was always interested in the Robert Kennedy assassination. I never could figure out, they never proved a motive on Oswald's part, and we have in the book the fact, he says I'm a patsy and all that. But with RFK's death, I could never figure out how this Palestinian named Sirhan Sirhan could have possibly gone ahead and killed, set up or killed Robert Kennedy, set it all up and done it himself. So I got to thinking, all right, can I connect? Who has the strongest motive? I think you'll be interested in this. Who has the strongest motive to have Robert Kennedy silenced? Well, we go back to Carlos Marcello, because he finds out, of course, that Robert Kennedy may become president of the United States. Well, if he does, then Robert Kennedy is going to come after him. So what I was able to do in the book, and just summarize a bit, is to go ahead. I have connected Sirhan Sirhan with Carlos Marcello via Mickey Cohen, who was Belli's, client, and showed how that stream of evidence leads right up to the fact where I show that just a few days before Robert Kennedy was assassinated, a paddock captain at Santa Anita Racetrack, south of Los Angeles, provides a videotaped interview in the book that shows he saw Sirhan in the accompaniment of two hoodlums. He had a brand new suit on, even though he was unemployed. They would later find four $100 bills in his pocket, and that he reported this information to the LAPD, just like you're talking about, and the FBI. They never got in contact with him at all. And obviously, that was a part of the plot to cover up what happened to Robert Kennedy. So I think people will see that pattern there through the use of three patsies by Marcello, that he was responsible for JFK, Dorothy Kilgallen, and Robert Kennedy's deaths.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. And it all ties in. It all makes sense. And that's the thing, the logic behind it, because all of the explanations we've been provided why these people were killed don't hold water. They make no sense, the official explanations. But with the backbone of the case that you're making, it's kind of a unified theory of why these people were taken out.
You're very perceptive, the pattern of what happened with the three. Unfortunately, though, the Warren Commission corruption, or the Warren Commission cover-up, has lasted to today, because the President of the United States went ahead and appointed the Task Force on something like Task Force Uncovering Classified Secrets, or whatever it was called. They put in charge a congresswoman from Florida, Anna Paulina Luna, who you may be aware of, who had no experience whatsoever with investigating anything. And they went ahead, the task force, and they went through an investigation of JFK's death. They went through, they looked at all of the possibilities there. They went ahead and it really basically has come down to the fact, which is very disappointing, that it was all political theater. They never permitted, for instance, I sent several letters to Luna telling her my research. They wouldn't let me testify. They wouldn't let with other people do that because they were all about the Oswald alone or CIA or whatever it may be, possibilities of killing JFK. And it's very disappointing. Now, one thing I have done that I want to mention in just a little time I'm sure we have left, and that is that I have written a letter to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he got it Monday. And I have said in that a week ago, and I've said to him, listen, I want you to be able to go ahead and see if you can help Sirhan Sirhan be released from prison. And in the book, people will see all of the statements that RFK Jr. has made over the years. He went to the prison where Sirhan was in San Diego. He hugged him. He said, I know you're not responsible for my father's death, and so on and so forth. Those are in the book. They're verified. People can look at them on the internet. And so I also tried in 2017 and was successful in helping get Sirhan a parole. And then, of course, the governor of our state in California, who wants to be president, reversed the parole decision by the parole board. So I have written to him and said, okay, you know this man is innocent. You know that you believe that is true. I want you to take action, perhaps going to the president or doing something to get him another parole board hearing, whatever it may be, to hopefully get this man who's 80 years old, who has been in prison for almost 60 years for a crime he did not commit, be released as soon as possible. Now, I'm holding out. I know it's a long shot, but I'm holding out because I want justice for Sirhan Sirhan, just as I want justice for Dorothy Kilgallen and for JFK. And I'm going to try until the day I die to get this justice for them, especially Sirhan, who's an innocent man in prison, and he should be released. He shouldn't spend one more day in prison, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy, but these things happen. Mark, can't thank you enough for coming back on the show and for really filling in the blanks in my knowledge. I have, for whatever reason, been a lifelong student of the Kennedy assassination. Not so much RFK, because to me that was open and shut. Sirhan did.
It wasn't.
Yeah, it didn't do it
that way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there was like no way that you get bullet wounds in the back from somebody shooting
the bullet
in front.
Yeah, right.
You can't be done.
Exactly.
And we knew about L.A. and, the Martin Luther King assassination. Dorothy, I never really knew, died a mysterious death. I didn't know. And Marilyn Monroe is kind of like a little bit before my time. Never really checked that one either. But they all have, this web that connects them, and it makes your explanation really compelling.
Well, thank you. And one of the things I say, because your viewers are going to say, why do we care about this? It happened 60 years ago. And I say to them, listen, here's the problem with these deaths in the 1960s, JFK, Dorothy, Marilyn Monroe, Robert Kennedy. Nobody asked any questions.
Yeah.
Okay? And they didn't ask the right questions. Dorothy's the only one that stood up against Hoover. They didn't ask the right questions. And so it's the same thing that's relevant today. You have to ask questions of your government. You cannot take for granted them telling you the truth no matter what comes out of Washington or with the government. You have to do your own research. You have to go and then ask the questions, because if you don't, then you've got nothing to gripe about. And that's the relevance of connecting what happened in the 60s to today for sure.
And I'll just further state that from the time of JFK's assassination, this country seems to have been on a marked decline, downward slope. Whether, and I tie it back to monetary policy too. One of the first things that LBJ did as president was take silver out of the coinage. And, that was 65. So 60 years later, we're still feeling the effects of these assassinations. Yeah, I wrote a whole piece about it because I just remember when it happened. I was only 8 years old, but then to actually go through the details of it, the history of it, how it occurred, was kind of shocking. A lot of things you never knew, like they had already made the decision to demonetize silver, to take it out of the coinage, but then the commemorative coin, which was the 1964 $50 to JFK, they felt that they couldn't make it a copper-clad coin because that would cheapen JFK's image, and there would be negative feedback from it. So they made it silver, and instantly all of those coins, the 64 Kennedys, which were 90% silver, were immediately hoarded out of circulation. So they said, well, we can't do this because we can't just produce these. Then they hoard them. So then they made 65 to 69, 40% silver, which was the minimum they could use to make it look like a silver coin. And those coins got hoarded out of existence. So all of these things, Mark, are connected. And what you're doing is unraveling that web. Like I say, things never went right for America after JFK was assassinated. Vietnam and Nixon Watergate, all of this, it's all connected.
Excellent. Boy, you're a lot smarter than I am with regard to those things, but I never knew about that LBJ connection. I'm going to look into that a little bit more, and people should read your book, and I'm going to get a copy of it as well. Good.
All right. Excellent. Well, hey, appreciate you coming on. Your book is available at Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and wherever fine books used to be sold. And hey, can't thank you enough. We'll put it out in our newsletter because you're doing really valuable work here. Obviously, you're doing your purpose, as am I. And that makes all the difference. It makes you ageless, and it makes you age with grace.
Absolutely. You're a good man. Thank you so much, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Kerry Lutz's Financial Survival Network, your solution to today's trying times. For the latest, go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Financial Survival Network, now more than ever.